So I think right off the bat, you've raised about $300 million during your career. What are your key insights? How did that go? Can you give us a little brief about it? What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, I did, in fact, I gave you one of my books where I talk about fundraising. First of all, when I came back from Bangladesh to run the Grameen Foundation, I had all the hang-ups about fundraising that is very, very common in our society. In fact, the most common thing I would hear from others, but that I would also say at that point was, it's like, I will do anything for this organization I care about, except what? Except fundraising, because I'm not good at it and I don't like to do it. And it's actually amazing so much money gets raised in this country, about $500 billion every year from individuals, from private sources, because we all operate under that. And so I always wanted to delegate it. I resented it. I didn't like it. Does this sound familiar to anyone? Right? So, and yet I had a great trainer, a fundraising consultant. Someone like Vijay, who kind of just had grown up also through the university fundraising, which is some of the best fundraising. And David and his team are outstanding, and that's where the best fundraising is done in this country. And so in this book and in other writings, I wrote down some of the things. But basically, ultimately, I stopped seeing fundraising as a kind of zero-sum transaction where I'm trying to I want to manipulate you to give what you have to me and to my cause, and either you win or I win, right? And I started to think of it as actually how can we form a partnership to transform something we both care about? And so I stopped thinking of fundraising as transactional, but started to think of it as more as transformational. And how it is, as I said, how can fundraising, if it's meant to happen, it's a win-win-win transaction. It's a win for the donor, and then you need to understand the donor to understand what's a win for them. So it's just like you don't ask someone to marry you on the first date. I mean, unless you want to, but it's probably not going to work out. You want to, what is it that you're excited about? What is it? And then once I understand that, I can put together a partnership that's a win for you, a win for me as the fundraiser, a win for my organization, and a win for the cause that we care about, if we can execute well on it. So fundamentally, my mentality around fundraising, from the executive who wanted to delegate it and who resented it and who thought of it as that kind of transaction, to just honestly, I used to neglect other parts of my job to do more fundraising than I probably should have, because it was so fun. And so that's and once the mentality changes, there are all sorts of techniques, and some people use different techniques, and they don't, but ultimately it was the mindset change, and then the money just started to flow. And yes, it helps when the economy's good. The stock market's done well this year, and sometimes the wind is at your back, and sometimes it's in your face. But if you just go at fundraising as just trying to, it's like a matchmaking service, right? You ever set up two people on a date and then they go off and get married? You know how fun that is to watch that? Putting it together a philanthropic partnership that works out is, to me, it's as joyful and fun as that, and I'm always just looking to do it.
That's very interesting. But I'm also curious to know, you talked about $300 million, that's a lot of money, right? How do you sort of see the impact of that cash? Because there can be, cash can go everywhere. There are reports that say, for example, with the Hawaiian floods, they are giving 10% of the money donated and things like that. So there's a lot of loss in certain cases. So how do you sort of see that impact, track that impact, and how does that result?
Well, first of all, there's no substitute for, if you can, to the extent you can, actually going to see the work that's being done with your money, or going to see the work that is being done that your money would bring out, bring out in a bigger way. Now, you can't always do that. Things are remote. We have busy lives. We have baseball playoff games to go see. Things all like that. But that's number one. Number two is to look at data. Right? There's a trend, perhaps being overdone, but having social scientists study whether things work. And then look at things. Now, if there isn't data yet because it's too new, or because the nonprofit has enough money to spend to study it, well, maybe that's where your philanthropy can help, is actually to bring some more research to it. But ultimately, I think as a donor, you need to kind of find people that, as far as you can tell, are trustworthy, and realize that if you give them money to do something that is worthwhile, and potentially a breakthrough in addressing an issue you care about, whether it's poverty, whether it's climate change, whatever, first of all, it's not always going to work. So you can't play the kind of gotcha game, just like not every investment in Silicon Valley works. And then secondly, you need to realize that, that nonprofits actually need money to spend on their operations, right? So when you're playing that gotcha game of how little do you spend on overhead, and I'm only going to give you, I mean, do you choose airlines, Venki, based on the airline that spends the least on maintenance? Is that what the airline you want to fly on? No. But that's sometimes the way we think about giving money to charities. Yes, there are charities that are poorly run, that are spending money on things they shouldn't be in huge amounts, and you want to avoid those. But in general, if you want to run a nonprofit that is not simply a kind of a least cost contractor to do what is already known works, and there's a role for those, but is trying to push the envelope and do great work, then you need to take some chances. You need to allow them to spend the money on both their programs and on their back office administration and fundraising and IT. So ultimately, see it if you can, and just find people that are trustworthy and also that will tell you when things are going wrong. One of the things I learned as a fundraiser is when we have, and you know, David, you can tell me if you disagree. When you're using a donor's money to do something and something doesn't work out as planned, my first instinct was, how do we hide it? But you know what? If they're curious, they're ultimately, these are smart people. They've made a lot of money. They're going to find out. So the question is, bring it to them proactively and engage them in trying to solve it, if they have some interest and capability to do so. And so in that way, sometimes when I made the biggest mistakes as an executive, but I was actually honest and forthright with people about it, the trust actually increased with the donor as opposed to went down. But again, I didn't know that at the beginning of this journey, but I know it now.
That's extremely interesting. But I also think you said that, you know, it's a lot of investing in worthwhile things. And I was just in my economics class, and I was told that, you know, it's India's decade, India's going to be booming, the next 15 years is great, it's the next China and things like that. But, you know, how do you sort of see the effect of philanthropy on India's next decade as the big decade? Because there are still so many problems. You pointed out child malnutrition, you pointed out poverty, you pointed out employment. So how does philanthropy go about tackling those problems and issues?
Well, first of all, it won't. Good questions, huh? Yeah. First of all, you know, we can also look in the United States. This $500 billion that is contributed to charities here. Again, we're the wealthiest country in the world by some measures. Yet we have a whole boatload of problems, right? I mean, if you haven't noticed, coming from Bengal, and so philanthropy has a quality to it. You can kind of take risks. You can experiment with things that, you know, business, by the way, sometimes does a lot of good for society, but business is kind of driven ultimately by quarterly, yearly profits and stock price. And so they trying to bring a product that will create good. There is some, but you just kept getting pulled away. Now, government can do a lot of good, but government is always, how do I get reelected in 2 years or 4 years? And so a lot of politicians and government officials are kind of more on the ideology side. But at the local and state level, in both countries, in my experience, there's a real pragmatism. Like, you've got a good idea, you're a nonprofit, well, let's see if it really works, then I'll take it on. Like, pride of authorship, let's just solve problems for people, whether you're from this party or that party, conservative or liberal, and secular or more of a religious party. But like, if the pothole gets filled or not, like, people just care whether it's filled. So I find that that's one of the big roles of philanthropy. I think the other big role for philanthropy and volunteerism, which the Indian American community excels in based on our surveys, is it creates an ability. Democracy, voting every 2 or 4 years is just the bare minimum to be, I think, an engaged citizen. And one of the ways, beyond just voting, to be an engaged citizen is to just say, what problem am I going to solve? Like, I saw this problem that I described up here from the nonprofit community working in isolation. And then I just said, I wasn't looking to anyone else to solve it. I said, I'm going to. Well, by writing a check, becoming a volunteer, you're kind of saying, I'm part of the solution to this problem. And let's start, whether it's writing a concept note like I did, or something else. And so it's part of having an engaged citizenry, and one that feels a sense of agency with the problems that are going on. Because again, if you're always sitting here with these problems, I don't know, homelessness is a big problem in DC where I'm from. I think it's an issue here. And if all you can say about homelessness is, well, the government is failing, or business is failing, or whatever, the housing developers are failing, you can do that, but it's a very hollow kind of citizenship where you say, no, okay, who can I find, who can I work with, who can I partner with, who can I write a check to, that we can actually solve this thing. Maybe not solve it for all of Philadelphia, but for 3 blocks, and then we'll go from there. And so I think philanthropy, it can do things that business and government struggle to do, and it can just have citizens start to take that full responsibility for their role in society, where they don't have to do it all themselves. They can write a check or volunteer for an organization that's actually set up an infrastructure to channel money and time to be done useful to do data tested solutions, and that everyone doesn't have to reinvent the wheel.
I think we talked a lot about writing a lot of checks, and talked a lot about raising money and things like that. As a 20
Is he going to solicit me right now? Oh my God.
As a 21-year-old, like studying in college, and I'm sure a lot of students here, we don't have a lot of money, right? We're trying to pay for college, we're trying to meet our expenses and things like that. And the entire perception around philanthropy is that it's a rich, old people kind of thing where people have a lot of wealth and they're maybe giving it away and things like that. What do you think about that perception, and maybe what's your mindset or outlook on changing that? And what's the reality in your view?
Okay, well, I dodged that bullet. No, I'd write a check to something you wanted. But I think that as a student, or anyone who doesn't have a lot of financial resources, I started giving to nonprofits. I started writing checks, small ones, when I was in college, when I was in high school even. The amount isn't the important point. By the way, in India Giving Day, the way we set it up, this $125,000 that we have as a matching or a matching pool, and it's mostly based on a donation rather than the amount. So, and any for example, we do a fun thing that we learned from the folks in Dallas, and so what we do is the first 10 donations at 3 a.m. on India Giving Day get matched with like $500. And it can be any amount from a donation is any amount of contribution $5 or up, right? And $5, how much does a latte cost these days? I'm a tea drinker, but $5. So you give up a latte, and if you kind of game the system that we've set up and have fun with it, you might get and the fact that you gave $5 and I gave 5,000, it's just the purposes of the matching. In many cases, it's just where we have the equal chance to get the match, and so give something. And by the way, observe how nonprofits. My phone is ringing. I'm like imagining like my wife is calling me, like, Alex, stop telling that story. Anyway, no, it's not my wife. And so so see how nonprofits treat you. You send your $5 check or $15 check. You want to do 3 lattes. Give them to 3 different groups and see which ones of them, how they, do some of them send you an email like every 12 hours for the next year, and Others of them never communicate at all. Which ones of them? And when you get to that point, and I see your intellect, I mean, you're going to be, if you choose to, be earning a lot of money in probably 10 or 15 years. You start testing these groups out now. Which ones, do they do the work that I like? Do they treat me the way I want to be treated as a $5 donor? The other thing is I don't, we intentionally call India Giving Day, not India Philanthropy Day. I mean, first of all, my people who mentor me in writing, it's like bring down the number of syllables, shorter sentences, shorter paragraphs, shorter words. But also giving is something where you're saying, however you give, whether you're giving your time, whether you're giving money of any amount, whether you're giving your influence, right? So lots of people today, people with huge followings and very small followings are saying, putting on their social media, if they're into that, LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook, saying India Giving Day is coming. I'm going to be part of it. It's important. Check it out. Just that little act, but particularly if it's scaled over many people, starts to create this kind of tsunami of support and interest in it. And so use your influence. And we're, not all of us can influence the same number, but we all can influence someone. And so I just say, just like any donor or any contributor, any giver, play to your strengths, do what you like to do. Some people like to serve on boards. And you're involved in many different things. So being in that group context seems to appeal to you. Some people don't like to be on boards. By the way, a little tip for those of you. One of the big mistakes I made in my career was there was a very, very, very rich man who was involved in Grameen Foundation when I ran it. And his assistant said to me, don't recruit him onto the board, because it's not how he likes to engage with nonprofits. And I had this wrong idea in my head, which was it would be so prestigious to bring him onto the board. And we found a weak moment after he'd visited one of our programs. So he went and in his private jet flew down to southern Mexico. And in a weak moment, a colleague of mine with my full support asked him to join the board, and he said yes. And at that moment, our relationship with him began to go downhill. And at some point, it just never recovered. So play to people, that was not his strength. We were advised well by his handler, and we didn't follow the advice. And and how you want to engage with nonprofits will change over time. So the way I want to engage, the way you'll want to engage with time, but play to your strengths, do what you want to do, listen to your intellect and to your heart, and you can do that at any age, at any stage, with any size bank account. But boy, I would, if I was one of these nonprofits in here, I would want to have you start contributing $5 a year, because also I see where you're going. I would want you on my team thinking long-term. And the Sehgal Foundation, which is right here, Jay Sehgal, they send some interns, even high school level, to India to carry out projects under proper supervision, to just feeling that sense of agency. Are those high school students going to write $1 million checks now? No. But they're going to do what they can probably for their entire lives. And that's one of the best practices we learn about engaging youth, is you play the long game. So hopefully on this networking break, we'll take in a few minutes. There'll be people coming up and wanting to get you involved, because you're gonna make a huge impact. I can just tell that from our time together. And of course the Bengali speakers get everything done, right? So anyway.
Yeah, I think we're running out of time, but one last question. You spend a lot of time with a Nobel laureate peace winner, right? That's a huge deal. Not a lot of us have the privilege of having someone mentor us like that. So what was your experience? Would you want to share anything about that? How did that help you in your social entrepreneurship journey?
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't know he was going to win a Nobel Peace Prize, but or economics prize. We thought that was possible. But by the way, if you're wondering, if you're in this social entrepreneurship space, and if you're wondering if your mentor wins the Nobel Peace Prize and you get to sit in row 11 in the Oslo City Hall, you wondering whether that's cool or not? It is. Now, the reality is, and people like Venki know this, there are so many people doing great social entrepreneurial things that don't get that recognition. So we realized that there were, that it was a lot of factors, including just luck, and we don't really know how they deliberate. But yeah, I would say It's been a great experience. It's had its ups and downs. He gave me a lot of responsibilities. There were times that I disappointed him. And that wasn't easy for him or for me. We've been partnering for 35 years. I've been married for 30 years, but I've been working with him for 35. So, um, and but we had dinner 9 days ago in New York with a number of other of his strong allies. He's 83. I'm not going to be working that hard when I'm 83 or anywhere close. If I live that long. Amazing man. But what I would just say as a final thing to particularly the students who are tuning in or who are here is that that moment of inspiration where I had a mentor of mine suggest that I write a letter to Muhammad Yunus. There was no email back then, no texting, WhatsApp, nothing. I wrote an old-fashioned letter, and and he responded. He didn't have to do that. So a couple things there. First of all, I could anticipate where his career was going, the impact he would have, and I wanted to be part of that. I didn't need to invent my own solution. I wanted to find someone who had a great solution who could use a boost from me, whatever my talents and gifts were or would become. So I didn't overthink it. When a mentor told me on a Friday to write him a letter, I put it in the mail on Monday in 1987 when I was a junior in college. And on the other side, he responded. He didn't have to do that. And I still have the letter he wrote me in 1987. And so as you go through, and others of you go through, and you become more kind of mid-career professionals, you're going to get lots of letters and appeals to talk, to mentor. And I tell you, I find it so hard to say no to people. Young people who want to get that first conversation, that first contact, that first internship, because he had the grace for me when I had no basic skills of any real significance, and he said, "Come join the team," So it was remarkable, but I guess if I'm trying to spin a lesson learned out of it is when you see someone that is working on something you care about, they're not so famous that they've put together all these handlers around them. But they're kind of going in that direction of having super big impact. Reach out to them. Propose yourself to be of service to them. Take an unpaid internship if you can afford to. And then when you're in the position on the other side, when you can be that supporter to a young person, then take the time, take the call, and give them the confidence of just even being heard and being listened to if you can't give them something. Again, Jay is a master at that. Venki is a master at that. The folks you'll hear from Community Pure Water do that brilliantly. So, but again, I'm so pleased that we've got to know each other preparing for this. And I think, David, we're just going to take a little break here, get some water, tea, whatever we have, and then start up again with a session. Please stay here, stay online. I don't know whether to play some music or what they're going to do for the next 10 or 15 minutes, but you're going to hear about a great partnership between a corporate philanthropy, a nonprofit, and a university. And it just shows that, again, involving higher ed in these things, partnerships to change or make the biggest difference. So
Thank you.
All right.